Good morning, and good morning to our very special guest today, who is here for the very first time, Dr. David Sweet. I don't have to introduce him with a lot of words and a lot of information because he is a prominent figure here in the foreign community in Japan, and I'm sure that most everybody probably has already met him, either through work or through the networking events that we always have here in Tokyo or other parts of the country. Just a few words. Dr. David Sweet is the CEO of the FocusCore Group, and he's also an executive coach. Well, in Japan, and I believe also with international clients. So today we're going to talk about a topic that is very dear to my heart as well, because we're going to talk about business, of course, business in Japan, and people, and also leadership, because this is something that we do need very dearly. But I think that very few people actually take those courses, or maybe my information is just mistaken. And David, then I'll be happy if you can correct me. So, but without further ado, I would like to go into this conversation because we have only 60 minutes and it's a very short time to cover information and, well, as much information as I would like to hear from you. And so the first thing, of course, I always ask our guest speakers is, what is your Japan story? Because we all come to Japan through different channels and we experience the country in different ways. And I believe that, well, sharing our Japan story actually helps other people, other listeners here, enrich their perspective and also understand that there are probably some aspects of this country that they haven't discovered yet, or maybe they can relate to. So, what is your Japan story, David?
Well, thank you, Maya. That's nice. Nice introduction. I appreciate it. So I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, in the U.S. Um, I was fourth generation Denverite and had planned to. I went to school and planned to go overseas and live. And I'd spent 6 months traveling around Europe, seeing where I wanted to go and live. And during that time, I was in Germany in Neuschwanstein. Took a tour of King Ludwig's great castles.
Mm-hmm.
Neuschwanstein's the one that Disney used for
Yeah.
Disneyland. And um, while I was there, I was 18 and or 19, and I was following around some girls, and I followed. Uh, I tried to meet a couple of them. And finally, going back down to the tour bus, I got the nerve up and I talked to these two wonderful Japanese girls. And we exchanged addresses, got back on the tour bus. I went back to Munich, but my camera was lost or stolen. And so I went back to the US a few months later and I wrote a letter to this beautiful girl if she would send me some pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And after 7 years of being pen pals, I came over to Japan for 2 weeks. We fell in love, and the next year she moved to Denver, and we got married.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that's because I had no interest or knowledge of Japan really, and so living in raising a couple of kids in Denver, decided at some point it'd be good to come to Japan and find out about her culture and her life. And so we did that. And that was about 27 years ago. And so that's how I got to Japan.
Right. So it's still a different story because many people, many of my well, Western friends who are here in Japan and have been in Japan a long term, they have come through jet programs or they have come through. Their companies, they have been sent here to work for the Japanese side of their businesses and so on. So it's a story that I can relate to because I came here because of my husband.
Mm.
So he's Japanese, right? But and because of well, the culture shock during my first 3 years in Japan, I want to ask you, what was the most shocking thing for you when you moved to Japan?
I do think size was a big thing. Thinking back, the first apartment. So I came over on jet as well. I'd worked for the U.S. government for 10 years doing labor relation and employee development. Earned my doctorate, and then we came over to Japan,
Hmm.
and the JET program was great because I had
Okay.
taught I taught junior high, I had taught university, and so I this was a chance to teach high school, which was it was all right. That's what my degree was in. Um, but I was surprised at coming over, and so I came over on JET program because it was kind of a safe business.
Okay. Right. Okay.
It was another government sponsored program. So I was a strange jet because I was married with a couple of kids. And they wonderfully inside I was in Saitama in Soka, and they wonderfully put us up in a nice little apartment, but it was small. And so to have, two
Yes.
kids and and this kind of 2 LDK was just like, wow, coming from having, a big house, everybody having their own rooms. I think that was a big shock. And then the other thing coming from Denver, which is not a big city, is just how big Tokyo and the metropolitan area really was. That it was just city, 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 more city, and then some more city. And so that was a big change for me as well.
Yeah. I remember my first visit to Japan. Actually, it was half a year before we got married. So
Okay.
we came to Japan for maybe 10 days. And I remember getting off at Narita and getting on the train and traveling to Tokyo and seeing, as you say, it was city and city and city and city. And there were all these houses. And the houses to me, I mean, I come from Eastern Europe where we build houses with brick and stone, right?
Mm.
And they last for centuries there. And they're big and everything. And seeing all these wooden houses, one after the other, and in such a close proximity to one another, it
Yeah.
was so stressful even then. And I was like, how can people live here?
There's no
Yeah,
yards. It's yeah, it's very semi.
yes.
Yeah.
Very semi, yes. But then, of course, you you just get used to it, right? At the end of the day, and at some point, I also came to believe that if I had a bigger place at that time, I would need more time for cleaning, which I didn't want to, I didn't want to spend more time on cleaning. So it was enough for two people. Okay, because we didn't have children at that time, of course. So, but it's interesting because I believe that the Japanese homes are, especially in the cities, because the countryside is a different story again. But in the cities, the Japanese homes are maybe one of the first things that we
Mm.
get shocked with.
Did you speak Japanese when you moved here?
No,
Because
I
I'm
didn't.
interested that both of us didn't mention the language, and when we came over, Japan's still not a great English speaking
No.
country, but it's still not the thing that really was a culture shock coming over. 'Cause I just knew that everything was going to be different, and it just
Yeah,
was, right?
it was. Yes.
It was space, not language that shocked me.
Yes, it was space, and for me, it was also the silence on the train. Um, because when we got on the train, once again, and every train actually I used at that time, most of the time there were many people there. And when I commuted to work as well,
Mm,
I commuted during rush hour, so
mm,
the trains were packed, but they were so quiet. I mean, how could you have so many people without who are not saying anything?
mm, mm,
Right? It was quiet. That silence was also shocking. And I thought, for me, you're surrounded by people and you still feel lonely because nobody's talking and you don't know what people are thinking because they're not saying anything. So, because of course back home it's different. When there are so many people on the bus or on the train, you hear people's conversations, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But it's still you know what the people around you are thinking about. And here in Japan, I didn't. So that
Yeah.
was another source of stress for me. And I wonder whether you noticed that in the beginning, or yeah, or maybe it didn't strike you at all.
I think I what I noticed was um, speaking quietly,
Hmm.
and that uh, there were conversations that go on, but it's a very small drone, and English is a very loud language, and it projects pretty well compared to Japanese, and how to bring that level down on public transportation. But I always enjoyed public transportation. It was gave me a lot of chance to read.
Yeah,
That's the thing I loved about it is there's so much. 'Cause when I moved over, I started studying Japanese, and so that was good. When immediately moved over, didn't have a car, drove. I had a bike, so I'd ride to the school on bike, no matter what weather, and that's really refreshing living without automobiles compared to the U.S., where everybody in the family needs to have an automobile, and you just need to go 2 blocks and still drive that 2 blocks to get somewhere. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. Nowadays, I don't do that very much, but I remember back then, maybe because of that silence, as you said, and the quietness there. So I always had a book in my bag, and it was really easy. And the commuting times, depending on where you are in Tokyo and where your workplace is, can be like 1 hour. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah,
yes,
well,
which
that
is
was
great for, yeah.
yeah, you think about things that are culture shocks. They're the weird things. It's not the big things. The one and my sons, when we visited their grandparents in the US, had this reverse culture shock, which is when you come to Japan and you go to the restrooms, the public bathrooms, they're clean, but
Mm,
there are no paper towels.
right.
And so you're used to carrying a towel or a handkerchief for wiping your hands. And I remember my kids being a little bit bigger and visiting their parents in the U.S. and grandparents in the U.S. and there's paper towels in the bathroom, and I think that was a shock. So there's just hundreds of little things that are enticing and wonderful, and sometimes infuriating and fun.
Yes. I remember, well, we sometimes talk when I talk with friends, and well, also until I had this podcast with Tim Sullivan, we would joke sometimes that we love Japan because of all the things that are so infuriating here.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
the things that are infuriating are the things that are endearing, and vice versa for each country. It's like if I go to a restaurant in the US, I can substitute anything on the plate for anything else, and the waitress is probably or waiter is probably okay to get that done. They'll bring it out and it's going to be screwed up somehow. They're going to miss something, right? But it was
okay.
flexible, right? They could do whatever
Yes,
I wanted.
yes.
In Japan, very little flexibility, brought out perfect every time. So, you want the flexibility, you want the perfection. It's
Yeah.
okay. You gotta embrace the other, whatever that is. I think
Oh,
having
yeah.
having moved back and forth between both countries, trying to find that perfect spot for living and raising kids, it's just realize there isn't one. There's ups and downs with it everywhere you live.
Oh, yes. And that's why I really am fascinating nowadays with this hype about Japan.
Mm,
Because people who live out of the country, they romanticize Japan so much, right?
mm.
And I have quite a few acquaintances who reach out to me and they say, I want to move to Japan. I want to live there. I want to work there. Tell me what I need to do. And I'm like, yeah, it's really wonderful. It's a wonderful place to be, but it is not for everybody. And if you have high expectations that everything is going to be at least as good or well as everything in your country and then some more, then you're not really somebody who needs to come here.
Mm,
because of those different things. The cultures are different, right? And the culture shock, it always comes. It doesn't matter whether your culture is close to the Japanese or not, it's
mm.
still a different place. And the logic is different, and business is different and everything. So yeah, it's there is no perfect spot to be in. There is just a place where you like, and you learn to appreciate the benefits better than the disadvantages.
Yeah, there's so we have so many. I'm being in recruitment. A lot of candidates want to come over to Japan, and they visited 2 or 3 times. Once, twice a week, I'll get emails. I've been to Japan 3, 4 times. Went skiing in Niseko. I love it. I want to move to Japan. I have a CPA. What can I do? And it's not. You can't.
Yeah.
There is a barrier to entry, right? That I was speaking to a candidate yesterday, and you know, I speak to a lot of foreign candidates who have challenges because they may not speak the language and not have worked in Japan, but they have great qualifications in their own country. And then they come over to Japan and they find it very difficult to get a job. And there might be places for them. It's difficult to go through LinkedIn or job boards. Anything that has to go through HR tends to be
Mm,
difficult because HR's job is to fill a requisition that is specific. Um, Business leaders might be a bit more flexible.
right.
But then, one of the insights that I gave the woman I was speaking to was that I've had candidates that were Japanese who have maybe gone to school overseas, worked overseas, and then try to come back, and
Hmm.
they are rejected a lot.
Yeah.
Not and it's not language, it's not because they're Japanese, but they don't have the work experience in Japan. And so I think it's easy for us to just hone in and say, wow, they're not Japanese and they don't have language, so I can't get a job. Well, sometimes it's very difficult for someone who is Japanese, who has the language, to
Mm,
get a job as well. So yeah,
yeah.
culture is always different for that.
It is indeed. And I also, you mentioned that, of course, in Japan, there is very little flexibility in a lot of things, right? Of course, it's customer service, it's also the business models here, the way, the planning is done, and then projects are executed, and so on. And I also think that if you want to build a business here as well, it's difficult if you come from another part of the world. And I wanted to ask you how it is for you because you built your business here in Japan, and I mean, the business culture is very different from the American business culture. So
Mhm.
how is this for you? And also you work in recruiting, executive recruitment, right? I imagine that it is even, as you just mentioned, there are so many more things to consider while being building the business and building the network that is necessary for growing the business and everything.
Mm. I was just sitting there thinking, there's a couple of things that go through my mind. First, I'd worked in Japan for 10 years before starting my first business. And I started my first business in the US, which was a lot of it was around educating sales and recruiters in Japan. But I was working in Asia and the US as well. And then Lehman Shock happened and I went bankrupt. And so I learned how to fail.
Right, yeah.
So that was a thing. And then coming back to Japan, really having a network, knowing the industry very well, and being good at what I do. Um, that sounds like a brag, but it's not. But the reason I say that is because recruitment is one where you can pay for yourself
Right.
as an individual. So I can, like, coaching or training, you can go out and sell and then receive money. And so it's easier to build up a business in that sense. It's not like I have an idea for an app and I need some funding. It's very different in that
Yeah,
sense. And I think doing that, you really do need a network, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a Japan network. But if you are going to be in Japan doing service or building a product for the Japanese community, it needs to be, you need to have that. You need to have a community here to do that.
yeah. I noticed one thing, and well, because nowadays setting up businesses and also startups, right? Um, and I think that started actually several years ago, but a lot of people come here, foreigners, and they come with the intention to set up a startup and to grow
Mm,
it here in Japan. And there is a tendency there. Of course, there are startup communities, but one thing that I noticed last year was that there is a startup community that consists mostly of Japanese startup owners, and there is a startup community that consists mostly of foreign startup owners, and those two communities don't mix.
mm,
So I hope that the situation has changed this year, but until the end of 2024, it was what it was, right? And so I wonder whether, and I was thinking back then that of course it's great to have your tribe, to have your community, but if you want to build a business in Japan, you do need to venture out of that bubble, the foreigners bubble, and to start communicating with local people, with local business owners, with local businesses as well. Of course, for some people it's difficult because they don't speak the language, but
mm.
I would still say that even when you don't speak the language, you can still communicate with locals. So, and I wonder what your thoughts on this are.
Yeah. Uh, my initial thought is so many businesses start up, whether they're Japanese or foreign owned and started, without any thought of selling. And that's the community you need to. That's the tribe you need to build. I
Your potential customers.
you need to you have customers. So many people, whether it's a simple service as simple as uh, say I'm an accounting firm or coaching. So many people are like, okay, I've got this certification.
Mhm.
I've built my website. So where are all my customers? Who are you speaking to? Who are you calling? Where are you going out networking? You notice I didn't say emailing. Where are you meeting people? And I think that's the most important. And then if you need to do fundraising, again, that's the end customer. And have you thought through where you're selling, and have you spoken to your customers? Do they realize you're there? Because the people that are going to invest in your company, that's what they're looking for, is where's that money going to come from in the long run. And
Right,
I think so many entrepreneurs have a great idea, they're creative, but they're not thinking about selling. And I had very dear friend who set up an accounting company, and I remember him coming and having a bit of coaching. And this he's worked at a Fortune 100 company as a CFO, built his website, and he said, I don't have any customers. Where are you selling?
right.
And he wasn't. He just was waiting. And if you're going to start up a company, you can't wait.
No, you cannot. And I think that networking is really undervalued,
Mm,
very, very much.
yeah,
Yeah. But yes, then okay, I want to move a little bit further because
sure.
yes, well, I want to talk about people and leadership. And once again, we touched upon this in the beginning of this conversation that, of course, both of us went through culture shock when we came to Japan. And of course, the cultures are different. The values we have are prioritized in different ways. And I wonder whether or how this actually translates into your work, because you do coaching. I believe that you coach both Japanese and foreign professionals. What differences do you see there?
It's a great question. See that the biggest difference for foreigners, they tend to be action oriented and they want uh, platforms for accountability or for idea generation, and they want to be pushed to the next level. In for the Japanese leaders that I work with, it's more around how to communicate to foreign leadership or how to lead in general. I the Japanese I kind of specialize with doing coaching for mid managers. That's what I really enjoy, the mid management. And I find when I go in and do a 360 interview of their employees, people around them and above them, even people outside the country, tends to be that they're very, very good at managing a team and protecting the team. Um, both sides, both foreigners and Japanese, have trouble delegating and time management. That's across the board, across
Hmm.
cultures. That always seems to be something that both have trouble doing. The Japanese tend to have the challenge when they're managing out and up, how to manage their manager and make them look good, and then how my picture got all black. Is that
Yeah.
and then how to manage, even their managers, and to realize that by doing that, they're able to be promoted and to realize their own ambition. So many managers really just take care of their own team and protect their team and
Right.
want their team to look good instead of thinking through how can I make my manager look good.
Yeah.
And that one thought switches how you can protect your team still, because that's still inherent in most managers, and how to get the best out of your team. But the messaging and how you message as a leader is much different. And I find that those are the two things that I do the most coaching with, whether they're Japanese or foreigners, is again, kind of dream realization, or how to manage up and out.
I see. Because from my experience here in Japan, I have seen how good the Japanese are. I would I say this is the ordinary employee, right? The members of the team. They are actually very good at what you might call managing their manager because of their, I mean, the Horenso thing, right? The principle here. And they're very good at building trust with their managers.
Yeah.
But then I always wonder why or what changes once they're promoted to a management position, right? Because suddenly that knowledge, that wisdom, it goes somewhere,
Mm.
and it becomes more difficult for them to manage their managers once they have become managers themselves, right? So it's really an interesting paradox for
Mm.
me. And of course, some people are good at that, they're better than others, but in general, as you say, they do need some some coaching in order to well, make their managers look good, and also, let's say, pave their road to the next promotion.
Yeah, and just for transparency, a lot of the companies that I work with, they'll have I'll be working with managers, and then their management is on the leadership board, who is dealing with usually HQ or APAC. And if your boss is dealing with HQ, their issues are different than a local mindset. And so it's a mindset change to realize home office is caring about profits. They're caring about growth, and they care about compliance and risk. And how do you at your level help your manager realize what their boss is doing around those kind of issues, um, and giving them the messaging and the strategy to help him or her to succeed. And I think
Mhm.
that's it's a key because it's still back to communication
Yeah,
and how and cultural differences, how headquarters has a different mindset. And it's not necessarily just that they have opinions or speak their mind. It's more about, are you giving the tools that they need to be able to speak their mind? Mm.
right. Yeah, I see. And then, okay, because I have also friends who are in that position.
Mm.
They have to facilitate the work, or they have to facilitate the communication between the headquarters somewhere in the United States or in Europe and the Japanese branch of the company, the operations here. And yeah, they struggle a lot. They do.
Hardest job.
That,
Hard
that
job.
yes, indeed. But then, so I wanted also to move a little bit further and just into a slightly different direction. I may be mistaken, and if I am, please correct me. But when I came to Japan in 2001, I didn't get the impression that there were so many recruiting companies. So, and I'm talking about companies that recruit, well, employees at different levels up to executive employment and recruitment, right? And then it looks like, the situation started to change maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And of course, the work culture here started to change too. People realized that they could be more mobile when it comes to their careers and so on and so on. But then, once again, how do you think that the landscape here has changed over the past 10 years or maybe the past 15 years?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it even further back, right? So in the 90s, there were only a handful of foreign recruiters, quite a few Japanese recruiters. So
Mm,
we don't, we talk about, um, we miss how saturated the Japanese market is with Japanese recruitment companies, and
right.
we forget about that. But there's that, and then there were a lot of, as there are in the U.S. and Europe, specialist recruiters. Kind of in Japan, in principle, you work for a company for life. You get moved up. Your kohai gets moved up. You don't. You retire. Often that person will become a recruiter for that company. Um, Traditionally.
Okay.
Um, in 2000s, we started to see a lot more international Western companies starting to set up in Japan.
Hmm.
That's kind of where you saw, Robert Walters, Michael Page, Robert Half. That's when, kind of these contingency firms opened up and started to expand within the market. And from that, you just always have, a lot of other branches open up, people who leave those companies and start up their own companies. And so that's kind of
Mm.
spring up. Uh, Fast forward after you have the Lehman shock
Mhm.
and the pandemic, that just cleans house. Foreigners leave, everything shrinks down, and then it restarts again. So we're now in a building phase post pandemic, and you'll see a lot of firms starting up. There's still, at Focus Core, we do search, and there's still not a lot of local search, really good search firms that just focus on the Japan market. It tends to
Mm.
be a lot more on the contingency side, or kind of an international, what we call Shreks, but that's kind of like your Spencer Stewart, Heidrick and Struggles, Corn Fairies, which are international in nature but very expensive. And so those have been here for a long time, but they tend not to be. Um, they're recognized globally, and but not necessarily the best for the market. And so it's just interesting how things have changed and kind of evolved within the market. But I do think there's still a lot of room for growth. It's because it's a candidate short market.
Mhm.
Everybody's looking for where the next silver bullet is to be able to recruit. And over the last 10 years, what we've seen is from banking and IT bringing talent bringing your contingency recruiter in-house and
All right.
having an internal TA. And so that's a new competition. Um, last 15 years, when I started recruiting, I've made placements through fax. Um, but yeah, using the newspaper was our job board. And now, you have LinkedIn, and it's not still not that popular in Japan, but it's still a resource that's being used. Um, so we're seeing more of that. And I think the thing that I'm excited about is AI and how you'll see it first with TAs and company growth and some of the bigger firms using AI. And that'll be great for really being able to grab as much data as possible. But
Mhm.
the downside of that is it's transactional.
Yeah.
And because it's transactional, you lose the human nature of it. And I mean, there's a lot of some companies, global companies. I haven't heard much about it in Japan, but global companies that are using AI for the first interview.
Hmm.
Definitely for resume screening, AI is being used, and they're using it to take out some of the prejudice that recruitment or talent acquisition or management might have when they're doing it as hires. But sometimes it's built in as well. I
Oh
was
yeah. The
I was
biases
in
are there.
I was at an international recruitment conference last week, and they they were talking about one AI system that was unintentionally biased. They looked at what was successful for this company and for this specific team, and all of the resumes and all the candidates that they went through were all male and a certain age bracket, and it was just the bias that was built into AI. So there's still a lot to be done with that, but I find it's exciting tools that and
Mhm.
that's kind of how I've seen it evolved over the years. I do think that we will see another shift as far as a growth. We're on the growth pattern now for firms, recruitment and search firms within the Japan market. It'll be interesting to watch how it becomes more international,
Mhm.
because the other big shift that I see is Japanese companies reaching out more and more to international companies, not Japanese companies, because they need English speakers, because they're wanting to expand into other markets. They need to hire in India or Thailand for expansion, and for those reasons, the domestic firms just aren't able to help them with that. And that's even for local talent. They need
Mhm.
local talent that speaks English to be able to communicate to Delhi or to Bangkok or wherever. And so that's another change.
I
I've
see.
thrown a lot there at you right now, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a user of all the technological, developments that or advancements that are available for the general
Mm.
public businesses and try to keep up. But at the same time, I still believe that the human relationship cannot be replaced. And when once some, as you said, some companies try to replace it with tools, AI tools, or any other tools, then it becomes purely. Oh, I lost the word.
I use the word transactional. I'm not sure if that's
Exactly.
what you
That's what I'm
got.
looking for. Thank you. So it becomes purely transactional. And my deep belief is that of course tools are very important because they save times. But at the same time, I don't believe that you can find the best candidate. I'm not saying the ideal, but I'm saying the best candidate out there just by using automation and
Mm.
AI and everything. So, do you think that the personal relationships and the personal networks will continue to be as important as they used to be, and maybe they still are? Or do you
Mm.
think that some recruiting companies will, regardless, they will transition to using more automation?
Both. I think you have companies that the big international companies will be more transactional, um, and they will be working with major companies like your Apples or Amazons who need more people,
Mm,
and they need transactional relationships. They're doing it now. They've done it for the last 10 years. It's about volume. It's volume hiring. And these companies, the HR, the talent acquisition teams, and the recruiters, that's a machine, and they need that. Um, SMEs can't function that way. They can't afford all the technology, and that's where the relationships are important. And even with the major firms, major companies, it I still believe it's about relationships, and it's about I still I'm old school. I think the hiring manager's main job is to hire, retain, and train, and the hiring managers should always be networking and meeting potential people for their team, always, and that's their one job.
mm,
If uh, if people are listening, get nothing out of this. If you're a manager, always be recruiting. You never know when you need to build out your team, and I think that's an important component. It's just relationships, and you can hire the best people by building out that relationship, and it might be someone you meet 5 years down the line,
mm.
and then you're ready to have that person join the team and to partner together. And I think that's so important.
Right, and just a little bit, I want to go a little bit deeper. So, you were in executive recruiting, and do you think that in executive recruiting, basically, it's more important to you, well, to rely on your network than on tools? Because I am out, I have never been in this field. So I come, from the position of somebody who is, I would say, 100% ignorant
Hmm.
about how recruiting is done, and what basically works best, and how the trends change, and so on and so on. So please forgive me if this question is very basic to you.
It's a great question. I love it. And so I'm going to clarify a couple of things. So recruitment to me is really about a firm going through and looking at a database or LinkedIn or a job board and getting a candidate. What we do at FocusCore and what search. So I do executive search, and to me, what that is first and foremost research,
Mhm,
and it's mapping a market. So, for example, a company will come to me when they want to hire a CFO. And what we do for them is we're going to go into that industry and we're going to find every single CFO that is in that market so that the company knows here are your 75 CFOs that are in your industry. And then, as in executive search, you start systematically approaching all of these potential candidates. Now, most people, thankfully, are happy at their job and they're not looking. Um, but in search, you get to have these conversations and one, build up your network
mhm,
and a local network, and then also have an understanding for what is in the market. So I spoke a minute ago about having that local knowledge, and you have some international companies that are hired to do a country manager search for Japan, and they'll go on LinkedIn without any relationships in
mm,
Japan, without an understanding of the market, and start willy-nilly reaching out to people and not knowing some of these people or their histories or background. And having been in this market nearly 30 years, and my team, we've have well over 60 years of recruitment experience.
right.
You're going out and mapping the market, but then you're also knowing, okay, these people within that market, are you can evaluate them against others. And so to me, it's first research, and then with that research, using the local knowledge to evaluate. And then from that evaluation, going through and finding out who's qualified for the position, really, who's interested, and who's available. Sometimes they're in projects and they're not ready to move. So to me, and what we do, which is different, is it's really being hired to research. And then there's a recruitment portion of that, because sometimes you'll go through and you map out that market of 75 people. The client will say, that's not at all what we want. These are not the
Oh,
talents that we want. This is not. And that's where you have that kind of that conversation that says, okay, great, let's reevaluate. Or the company says, really what we need to do is we need to bring someone from HQ, or let's change based on the market mapping that we've done, the research that we've achieved. What is really the best decision? And then you move on to the recruitment step of the process, and that recruitment can be very different depending on what the research says. So it's not just going in and saying we have an opening and throwing in a
right,
candidate. So that's
right.
kind of how I see the two different sorts of of recruiting within the market.
I see. Well, thank you for the educational part of this podcast because, yes, I always like to learn. And once again, I have to say that I've never been in the field or worked in the field of recruiting. I'm not going to work there. That's not my interest. Yeah, but it's always fascinating to me to learn, right? Because
Every
that
day is different. It's so
every
interesting.
yes, yes, indeed. And also, have you noticed? Because I work in the field of cross-cultural consulting, and one of the things that I do two things, but this is one of them. And do you think that basically some people, when you recruit them, they do need to learn more about Japan and how Japanese companies work? Is it or is it part of the consideration when you're looking for candidates too? Because I'm sure that the let's say the recruiters you mentioned who are out of Japan and they do some research here without knowing anything about the market, they are probably you know in need of learning, but they don't realize that. But
Hmm.
how about other people? They want to come to Japan, they come to Japan, and maybe you recruit them. Let's say you search, you find them, and you recruit them. But is this a consideration for you whether they have that knowledge of the Japanese way of working or not?
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
it's a long-winded question.
it's
So-
the easy answer is that most of what we recruit and search for, and I think I speak for most companies, is Japanese nationals.
okay, right.
Now that's shifted over the last few years in that um, companies now will look for certain positions international. So, for
Mm-hmm,
example, IT is an easy one. That there's so many, for example, engineering positions. There just isn't the talent pool. Those need to be imported, um, and so they'll hire people and train them up on Japanese ways, Japanese language, etc. But for higher end talent, um, it tends to be someone who is very inundated in Japan. At
mm-hmm,
a country manager level search, it used to be much more you'd bring or look for an expat, and that is much less warranted now. There's enough talent within the Japan market. Now, it could be a foreigner.
mm-hmm,
So I think last year for our country manager searches, about half were foreigners who long-term residents in Japan. So they spoke the language, they knew business, they had networks here. So some companies will come in and say, we want someone who's Japanese, but the
right.
skill sets that they really need might be from a foreigner.
Mm-hmm,
And the Japanese face and mindset might not be the foremost skills that they need on that. Now, for some companies, if you're dealing, with a very domestic market, then maybe you do need the Japanese face
Mm.
mindset, perfect Keigo. Um, so that needs to be evaluated. But I would still say 80-85% of the positions in upper management are Japanese.
Right. Yes. Okay. No, because these are also, well, let's say that's information about the current situation in the
Mm,
market, which is important also, I believe, for people who are out of the recruiting business. Well, and thank you for sharing the insights there.
mm.
And so, well, what are some of the, let's say, the challenges for companies like yours that you see at the moment? Because the market is changing. Japan is changing, as I mean, at a very fast pace. Of course, relatively, when we speak in relative terms, maybe that pace is not so fast when looked at from outside. But we know how it is and how Japan is. So these changes are really, really fast. So
Mm.
what are the challenges you and Focus Core, your Focus Core group faces at the moment, and maybe the industry as a whole?
Yeah, so I'll answer that on a couple of ways. The first, as an individual company, I think the challenge is always having an international reach. A lot of the international decisions um, are not made in Japan.
Mm,
So if you're trying to find a search partner, the upper management, HR at home office will often go with a brand name that or relationship that they know locally, not in Japan, and so they miss the Japan knowledge. For that reason, we've joined IIC Partners, and that gives us access to being in 45 countries now, and well over 500 employees that we can kind of pull on to help bolster that. I think the two things as an industry that are going to be a challenge. The first is, and there's really one, and that's the shortage of candidates. There's a shortage of talent. We got an aging population. There are gaps in skill sets, and because of that, companies are going to change and shift rapidly. And they're going to do a couple of things. They'll either look at how to offshore it, outshore it, put it into AI.
mm,
So, for example, I was speaking to someone at Novartis, and what they are doing is, sorry, not Novartis, Unilever, and what they're doing is they're taking AI as a hub. So when 10, 15 years ago, you were outsourcing it to China or Malaysia for finance. Now they're doing it with AI, and they're creating AI hubs. And again, that takes jobs outside of Japan. And so that's one. And with that is what's going to happen with international recruitment and bringing in international talent and
mm,
how that will change the market. My biggest concern on the whole is that because of its aging, because it's difficult to hire talent and the lack of talent, that companies will see it more appetizing to move to a different country
mm,
for certain aspects of their business. Now, Japan is still a very appetizing market for a lot of companies, but because of language barrier, because of the high cost to recruit or to set up, that warrants companies to move to somewhere like India, which is
right.
interesting. I was in Thailand last week, and they offer companies 12 years, corporate companies 12 years tax free.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's very appealing to
Yeah.
move into Thailand and set up there
Mm,
versus if you're setting up a services company, why not move it out of that and service the rest of Asia then instead of
mm.
Japan? So I think that's the threats that we face as a country and as in recruitment as well.
I see. And how do you think those challenges can be overcome? Or some ideas at least. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest one for me, and we've already talked on it, quite a bit, is just relationships. For me, is because those we still have a mammoth population. There'll still always be jobs. Japan's
Mm,
still appealing, regardless of all the barriers to entry. I think those things will relationships will still overcome a lot of that. At a certain level, a transactional level, those things will shift and move, disappear, come back in a different form.
mm,
But for like what we do at FocusCore and the level of search that we work at, that's not going to disappear. 50 years from now, search, you'll still have AI and you'll have different ways of finding people, but still it's going to be the relationships and the human judgment that's going to determine what's going to be the person you're going to bring into your company.
right. Yeah, I love that because a big part of, let's say, a big number of our podcasts are about relationships, right? And we talk about this, how important it is to build these relationships. And of course, sometimes it's difficult because you've got language barriers, but sometimes, well, it's not that difficult actually to build them. And it's mindset, right?
So we talked about at the beginning of the program. You and I,
Yes,
our,
once again.
our culture shock wasn't language. It was everything. It
Yeah.
was paper towels.
Yes, indeed. And the silence on the train.
Silence on the train.
Yes, yeah, indeed. So we're very close to 9 o'clock now. So again, just 60 minutes is not long enough time to touch upon everything and talk about more topics. But I want to say thank you so very much, really, for your time and for being with us this morning because it's wonderful to hear somebody who's got the deep insight and is willing to share their knowledge, right? Because not everybody wants to do that. And I one thing that I love about Japan is that people here believe that if you have something to share, if you have knowledge to share, you should do that because otherwise it's just, it stays locked and it's not helpful. It doesn't help the people around you. And if it doesn't help the people around you, it doesn't help you either. So uh, and yeah, once again, I'm very grateful for you being with us and sharing those insights. And I also wanted to tell that we've got quite, well, let's say several listeners who decided to comment today. We've got Johnny Cesar and Helder Philip, the mentor, and also, there is somebody whose name, Sa- Sato-san, but maybe Masayo-san. Masayo Sato-san, and also Richard Walton, Timothy Langley, they have been here, but I'm sure that there are also people who listened and didn't leave a comment. So thank you very much to everybody who tuned in as well.
Thank
And
you.
again, we'll be here once again next Wednesday. And David, at some point of time when you have another hour to spare, I would love to have you once again on the podcast and talk once again about your work. And if you're willing to share some more wisdom with us, I will be very grateful for that as well.
Thank you so much, Maya. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. And well, have a great Wednesday, everybody. And we will see you once again first this Sunday morning with the Japanese Politics podcast, and then next Wednesday again. Have a great day.